Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Kai Ryssdal, host of American Public Media's Marketplace, and your panelist for this morning's program.
Keyaun. Okay.
They have little sticky things with our names on them. Thank you all for coming on well, let me just say it's going to be 75 degrees in Los Angeles today, all right? I don't know how you guys do it. We will go, once I finish introductions, we will go, the panel and I, about 40 minutes, plus or minus. Then we will take some questions, and then Dr. Aoun will wrap things up for us. Just in case I forget to do it later, we are live streaming this, so if you do have a question, raise your hand. We've got a mic runner, and they will get microphones to you so that everybody on the live stream can figure out what you're saying. We'll start on the far end. Amy Scott is my colleague at Marketplace. She has been our education correspondent for 5 years, plus or minus.
Yeah,
5 years she's been there. Amy started with me at Marketplace on the overnights more years ago than either of us care to remember.
Right.
Keyaun Heydarian is a high school senior out in McLean, Virginia. He is also an entrepreneur. He is the founder and I guess are you the CEO as well? Do you run the thing?
I guess I am,
Of
yeah.
collegerolemodel.com, which is a site that hooks up prospective college students with kids already in college so that they can get a truer sense than you might get on the ordinary college tour. Bridget Terry Long is a professor of economics and education at the Graduate School of Education at Harvard University. And Dr. Aoun, is our host for the day. I wanted to start, Bridget Long, with you and a question about context. And since I am a reporter and a host of a business and economics program, I want you to frame for me Generation Z in light of the last 6 years in the American economy and how that shaped their answers to all of these questions in this survey.
Wow, that's a really great question. First of all, I find the survey results to be very interesting. I see a generation that's somewhat confused. There's some contradictions in the results. So they've heard the message that college is worth it. But then, given what's happened the last several years, they're very worried about whether or not they will be able to find a job, whether or not they will be able to support their families. They've also heard the messages that college debt is bad, but unfortunately they've taken it to the point of all college debt is bad because they know what's happened to their older siblings, cousins, and the generations just in front of them. But another part that I find somewhat interesting is the entrepreneurial spirit. Mm-hmm. So I wonder if this is a reaction to, many of our trusted institutions, companies, and so forth had huge layoffs, so people are feeling I have to create it for myself. But I'm not sure how to reconcile that with their desire to design their own majors. As we worry about things like market signal, what do employers actually need and want versus what might I enjoy in college?
Right. So let's ask the entrepreneur sitting next to you, and not to ask you, Keyaun, to speak for an entire generation. But as you started College Role Model and the other things that you've started, what was your driving force?
Well, my driving force is, I noticed a defect in the college admissions process where you don't necessarily, it's not very insightful when you go with a college tour, especially at public universities, large ones. At small ones, you tend to get, class-led tours, student-led tours, things like that. But I guess I always wanted to be an entrepreneur. Mm-hmm. I want to do things on my own. In my family, that's kind of a driving sense as well. My uncle, who passed away many years ago, he started a business, and I kind of got that entrepreneurial sense from him, mm-hmm. That I want to work for myself.
Is this a thing you guys talk about over lunch in the cafeteria?
It's not necessarily what we talk. No, definitely
right,
not this.
The
idea that I started the business, yeah, sure, we'll talk about that, but not necessarily, hey, I'm an entrepreneur. Yeah. Let's all be entrepreneurs.
Yeah. Amy did a year's worth of reporting on a series for us about a school out in Cincinnati, right?
Yep.
Called Euler School, which was in a very low income area. They were trying to make the school sort of the economic and social center of the society, right? And you spent a year reporting out there. She's got a documentary film coming out about it, so there's the plug. But I want to ask you about those kids who are lower and really lower middle class, lower income kids, and what your sense of how they're thinking about their future is regarding college and employment and debt and all of that.
Well, I think they, like a lot of the people in our survey, have a very pragmatic approach to college. They see it as a path to a job, and really the only good path to a good paying job. I think the school and others in the economy are trying to reconsider that. Is college really the only path, and can we have others that are better for some students, a better fit, like apprenticeships and technical programs. But for those kids, if they're going to do better than their parents did, and many of them want to, they believe that they need to get a degree of some kind, at least some college, maybe 2 years of community college.
Joseph Aoun, do you offer, as the president of Northeastern University, do you offer a product or an opportunity?
You want to offer an opportunity and never a product.
Never a product.
The life shelf of a product is very short. And here I was struck for going back to the discussion about entrepreneurship, for instance. What is entrepreneurship? And entrepreneurship is the ability to shape something, to succeed and to fail. So, it's not only about success, it's also about failure. And we want our students to launch their companies, to succeed, to launch their NGOs, to succeed, but also we realize that they'll fail. Let them fail fast, and start again. So you don't look at it as a product, you look at it as a journey.
So I got an F in Latin freshman year of college. I live with that today, I will tell you, but that's a whole different story. How do you, Bridget, convince these kids that part of what they have to learn in college is how to fail, right? I mean, your area of expertise is that transition between high school and college, and which is not to say that everybody had to take Latin freshman year in college and fail, but how do you set them up to understand that that's okay?
Well, I think going back to the context, we're in this winner-take-all, can't make any mistakes, so much competition, have to start my own business, have to stand out in some way. And so I think that only feeds into this fear that I can't fail, that I have to always be successful. And when you have competitive and college admissions, when you have a job market where no one feels safe, you always have to perform, it's scary to fail. And so I think that is one thing, though, that colleges and universities can give, the safe space that it's learning. It isn't perfection. It's becoming better and interacting with faculty and other institutions and their peers. The peers are a very important part of this, that when you stumble, you learn to stand up. And as a parent, as a faculty member, teacher, mentor, the most important thing you can do is the teaching of when you stumble, you stand back up. I think that is part of the entrepreneurial spirit, or at least I hope that's what we're seeing from them. The fact that we do see problems in this world and we need to step up and create solutions, whether that's a for-profit business or a nonprofit. And so I'm very happy to see that with the generation. And hopefully after living what they've gone through the last several years, seeing what their families have gone through, their friends, they've got some backbone now. They've seen things can get rough, but we do come back.
Dr. Aoun, you were mumbling under your breath. What do you got?
I mean, I think that what's very important is also to look at it in a global context. When you talk to our peers and in other countries, they say we cannot afford to have any failure. We cannot afford to give the students opportunity to fail because society does not accept failure. Our society accepts failure. Despite what we are seeing, you fail, and you fail fast, and you start again. And you see it in this ecosystem of entrepreneurship. You are seeing it with the opportunities that the Generation Z is having, but also with the students and with society at large. We are much more accepting of failure than other places. That's a plus we have to capitalize on. Look at Japan, look at France, look at England. They don't have it.
Amy, your experience at Euler and failure, talk to me about that for a minute.
Well, I can talk
different
about,
deal, right?
Yeah. I can talk about one of the students that I followed who went on to college and really struggled. She failed some classes and ended up changing her major. She learned a lot about the difference between a high school education in a very challenging neighborhood where almost no one had been graduating and college level courses. With a lot of support, she stuck it out her first year. She came back. And I think making it through, and I would be interested in what you have learned about access and persistence past that first year. It's kind of a make or break time, right? And she came back. So I think she learned a lot from that experience.
Well, answer that question, would you, Bridget?
Sure. I think for some students, we do tolerate failure. I think for more fluent students who have supports around them, you can fall and others will pick you up. I'm very concerned, though, about low-income students, particularly first-generation students, where when you stumble, unless the institution is going to wrap services around you and give you supports or mentors, or your parents who may not have gone to college but still want to help you in some way, they're just not quite sure how, that's a population I do worry about. That our higher education system is meant to be a place where you can learn. It's meant to be a second chance institution for many who perhaps didn't do well in high school. But for that to work, we need additional supports. We have to be very deliberate and thoughtful because in many places it's not happening. We're seeing huge dropout rates the first semester of college, particularly among low-income students. So while I think the president is right about the differences in the United States versus other countries, those second chances aren't always there for our most needy students.
I was struck, Amy, by something you said, that these kids at Euler are convinced, by and large, that they will be able to do better than their parents did. And this number that we see in the survey of 65% of kids think they will be better off than their parents. That kind of goes in the face of conventional wisdom of all the other surveys we've seen that say, you know what, this is the first generation in 100 years of 200 years of American history that we're not going to make that. How tangible is that? I mean, do they understand that out at Euler?
Well, I think we have to remember that these are 16 to 19-year-olds that we surveyed. And
so they don't know anything, right? Is that what
well,
we're saying?
I think optimism and youth go hand in hand. At Euler, I think I would guess you would find a little bit less optimism because the poverty is so extreme. But they've been told by their teachers, their counselors, the principal of the high school that I followed, that they can do this. The future is theirs, and I think we see a lot of confidence in this generation. The finding that 42% expect to work for themselves at some point during their careers, I think you could read that two ways, right? You could say, oh, they saw their parents get fired by these corporations, they no longer trust these institutions, or you could say this is a pretty confident bunch. They all have business ideas and they're going to take it, and make $1 million.
But they also don't understand reality, right? Because as Jocelyn was telling us, that 11% of Americans today work for themselves, not 42%. So, Keyaun, not to get to the lunchroom conversation, but as you think about not you at 20 next year or 19 next year in college someplace, but at 35 or 40, you still working for yourself? I mean, what are your peers going to be doing?
I don't think so. I don't think I'm going to be working for myself. That's not my original goal. That's not my final goal. My final goal is to go and work in finance, things like that. And it's kind of hard to work for yourself in that industry. You kind of have to work for other people, especially at some point, especially early on in your career. Actually, I've heard that it's important to, at some point, work for someone else, to learn to do things for other people, to learn to, do your job, carry out tasks, and kind of gain a work ethic. So it's important to kind of work for other people at some point.
Thoughts, Joseph, Aoun, on that?
I think that going back to what you said about education being a product or an opportunity, what is the opportunity? The opportunity is for the learners to learn about themselves, what they're good at, what they're not good at, what they like, what they don't like, and to understand the world. And what you were saying is that you want to explore your opportunities and then be part of something larger. He may end up being part of something larger and he may not. But that's the journey. That's the beauty of the journey. And that's what universities have to provide. That's a wake-up call for us about this survey. Because so far, we focused mainly on us as teachers. It's a teacher-centered approach. What they're telling us is that they want to shape their own journey. So we have to move from a teacher-centered curriculum, including Latin, to a learner-centered curriculum. Namely, they are the focus. We are not the focus. That's what they're telling us.
Okay, so since you're here and you're on the panel and there's a whole bunch of people there, I'm going to put you on the spot. 82, I think it was, % of the respondents in this survey are in favor of a government rating system to let them know, comparatively speaking, how their college does. It's sort of like a blender or a toaster. You go to Consumer Reports and you look up Northeastern or Harvard or whatever it is. I went this morning and I looked up tuition at Northeastern this year. which is $56,000 and change. Harvard's 58 and change. How do you convince somebody, and yes, we can talk about grants and scholarship and all that stuff, and I completely understand that, but how do you convince somebody that an item with a $56,000 price tag times 4 is worth their investment with an uncertain future?
Okay.
Because that's what these kids are worried about, right? These kids, we know from the survey, are worried about that uncertain future.
Absolutely, and you're absolutely right. So the first aspect, whether it's at Northeastern or any other university, you have to look at the value that you're providing. Higher education has focused on input measures, not output measures. What do I mean by that? So for instance, we talk about selectivity. What is selectivity? Or we brag about the number of students we receive who apply, and then we reject them. And we at Northeastern, we have 50,000 applications for 2,800 seats. So we measure our selectivity by exclusion. However, the other aspect is what you get out at the end of your education. Do you get jobs? Are you ready for life? Are you ready for society? Are you ready for that? We don't provide. So in general, in higher education, and that's something we need to provide. For instance, for us at Northeastern, as I mentioned to you, Kai, we have a system where in order to learn, you integrate the classroom experience with the world experience through co-ops, those internships.
Explain that briefly, like in 90 seconds or less.
So the students go on long-term internships, 6 months each. They are in 128 countries. So they learn about themselves, they know about the world, but also they get jobs out of that. So we decided that there is no dichotomy between learning to live and learning to earn a living. That's a value. So when you talk to a student who is incoming, who is coming to you, the first aspect is to explain what she is getting out of the whole process. At the end, am I ready for life? Am I getting jobs? Am I ready to negotiate society and negotiate multiple careers? If you can provide this value, that's the first step. Then the second step obviously becomes, can I afford that? Can I afford that? What about financial aid? What about working? What about et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? So you always start with a value proposition. And if you don't have a value proposition, you're going to have empty seats, and that's what we are seeing now in higher education.
The kids at Euler and the kids in your piece yesterday that you did for the show, gauge for me their measure of interest in the value proposition? I imagine the kids at Euler want to go to college and get a job, damn it, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And I think it depends how you look at value. One thing I think we learned or got a hint at from this study is that young people don't really see this as a period of self-discovery like people in my generation, I think, did. Huh. It's a means to an end. So I think the value for them maybe, is it going to get me a job or the career that I want? They also want to learn, they want to explore. One student I talked to at Bethesda Chevy Chase High School said she was looking forward to studying a subject in depth, and that's what she saw as the main reason to go to college. So I think it's not all a bunch of pragmatists out there, but that's what they're looking at.
Can I diverge from Amy?
Please. Sure.
Amy, implicitly, you are putting on one side, exploring oneself, on the other side, getting jobs. I think this dichotomy got us into trouble in higher education, because what we need to do is, at the same time, get our learners to learn to live and to learn to earn a living. This dichotomy is more reflection of your education and mine rather than their approach. They're not pitting one against the other, and
Right.
we are hearing that constantly.
Explain that a little bit.
Namely, in higher education, we said we don't care about jobs. Okay, our job is to teach and to students about the liberal arts, which is great. That's what we do, to teach them about themselves, which is good, to critical skills thinking. But when it comes to getting them an output, namely an outcome, namely jobs, this is not our reality. We don't want to touch it. Whereas, in fact, they are telling us we want both. This dichotomy is not something we believe in.
Okay, so go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, and yet, I talked to a small group of students at Bethesda Chevy Chase. It's nothing like our 1,000 student sample. But they told me they want a playbook. They want to know what courses they need to take, what grades they need to get.
Okay, you know what that is? That's the everybody gets a trophy after 9-year-old soccer. That's exactly what that is. And you have got to be kidding me. And I've got 4 kids, and they all got trophies when they were 9, and I was the coach who handed them out. But come on, figure it out for yourselves.
Well, see, this again is one of those contradictions. So I think part of the reason you do have to make the value proposition. I think what we're getting from the surveys, first of all, what's the alternative? I think they're saying we know we need to go, but we do want some kind of guarantee that at the end, something will be waiting for us. So college is important, but show us your job placement rates, show us your graduation rates, because I've now gotten the message that all schools aren't doing a good job. I don't think they've gotten much farther, though, than going to college, because you do see they want to explore some things. They may want to start their own business. I don't think they really know what real work is. Quite frankly.
Damn kids.
Here's
the deal, though. There are no guarantees, right?
There are no
I mean,
guarantees.
come on. You can go to Harvard. You can start your own company at 17 or whatever it is. Sometimes things break the other way for you.
And that's the notion of failure. That's the notion of
the notion
failure.
of failure. That's right.
Fail fast, and start again.
Well, one thing I did find
I'm sorry.
Please.
It's easier to do that, to take those risks, if you aren't looking at coming out with an average of $28,000 in debt. I mean,
Absolutely true. But let me just, since you brought up debt, because I want to get there, and we've all heard about the student debt crisis, and it's $1 trillion+ outstanding, and I understand that. But 69% of the people in the survey said $100 or less of student debt payment per month is acceptable to them. I ask you, Joseph Aoun, as the president of a major university in this country, is that realistic?
The $100 is not realistic, but let me tell you how I feel it's going to happen. The future is going to be for all of us. Those students, those learners, Generation Z, they're telling us we want to start and negotiate our own journey. So we provide in higher education an approach that says that we want you to be with us for 4 years at least. And then during the 4
No, 4 years. I got 4 kids.
Yeah,
4 years, I'm get out of here.
Yeah, if they
No, at least.
Now we are seeing that there are already early signs where students, those learners, want to start in Beijing for a year, where you lived, then go to Africa for the second year, and then join a college for 2 years at best. So what I'm saying is that our approach has to move from the standard campus-based approach for 4 years, where we are locking you up within the confine of a beautiful campus, to a situation where we have to provide a personalized education. We haven't provided a personalized education. It was a cookie-cutter approach in higher education. Yeah. Now we are seeing signs of that, and that's why it's important for me to listen to this survey. They are pushing us, what are you going to do for me, and what kind of education are you going to provide me, because my interest is different from Gabe's interest.
Everybody gets a trophy. How do you manage that transition then? I mean, this is your area of expertise, right? How do you do that? Because we're talking about societal change here.
Oh, absolutely. So one thing that we haven't brought up is the fact that they actually don't believe all college courses should be online. That we've kind of had this backlash that technology is not going to be the silver bullet. And I don't know if that means that they want to have more interpersonal relationships and they want peers and faculty with them who are going to help guide their process, or if they want to start in Beijing and do very different kinds of pathways through college. What I do see with all of this, though, is we've got bright people, hardworking, have huge goals. Now, what kind of supports can we give them to help them navigate through this system? So you mentioned the debt results.
Right.
Again, they got the message college is important, but after all of the media and the newspaper reporters about the student who has $100,000 debt and can't find a job, they got the response that, well, all debt is bad. When really, it's the interaction of a lot of things that are very personal for their situations, of where they're going to school, what they're majoring in, but it's certainly going to be more than $100, a month for most. Right. And so who are going to be the people, whether it is parents or teachers or the colleges and universities or the nonprofits, who are going to help them figure out how to navigate through this system to find the resources that are out there, because financial aid doesn't just drop on your desk, even though they all expect that they're going to be getting a great deal.
What's the conversation out in McLean about student debt and about what you guys want out of college?
So essentially, our area, for the most part, they weren't necessarily worried about, student debt, things like that, up until a few years ago. Actually, now more and more students are resorting to going to the state schools because it has become outrageous. The amount of the private universities, things like that, $65,000, $70,000 a year, that's just unmanageable. So when it's getting to our wealthy suburbs, that's when you know that something is clearly wrong and something it's too expensive.
Right. Yeah, Amy, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, one thing that I'm constantly struck by when I'm on college campuses is how little the students know about what their financial situation is going to be when they graduate. I'll say, so how much debt do you expect to graduate with? They have no idea. And these are probably kids whose parents signed the paperwork and maybe didn't talk them through the loans they were taking on. I think lower income students are much more savvy about the loans they're taking on. But I think this is why you don't have a very price-sensitive customer. And I think it's on all of us to educate them about, the debt they're taking on.
Go ahead.
Higher education is not unified. You have the publics, as you said, you have the privates, but also we have now offerings. For instance, some colleges and universities are telling you, come and take a degree with me, and it will cost you $2,000. Southern New Hampshire, competency-based. So the consumer has choices. So when we look at the average of 28,000 or in the average in the public universities going up and closing the gap with the privates, we are not also facing the situation where there are multiple offerings. And those offerings are now multiplying are getting to be more and more. You have the UT Austin and UT system, the University of Texas system also going in this direction, Wisconsin going in this direction. So the price pressure is leading universities to innovate, and they have to.
So assuming you can do the regression analysis and adjust for fit and temperament and all that stuff, do you think it fundamentally matters, Bridget, where you go to college? So long as you get that BA?
It depends on who you are. Because we know college is giving you competencies, you're learning certain material, but the really important part of it is the interaction with your peers, the interaction with your faculty, the networks that you build and that you reap benefits from for years to come. And so there have been a number of studies that have looked about whether or not college quality or selectivity matters, and for the most part for upper income students, no, but for low income students, where it's really introducing them into a whole new world of norms, of social networks, and so forth, we see huge impacts on their lives.
Should everybody in this economy go to college?
I think everybody should have a post-high school education, one way or another. Is it going to be college all the way? Not necessarily. There are opportunities for people to go to vocational schools. There are opportunities for people to go to college. There are opportunities for people to go beyond that. And so you have to provide an opportunity. And we know very well that those opportunities are correlated with lifetime income too.
I want to get off the college thing for just a second and touch on some other things in this survey. And then in about 5 or 10 minutes, we'll open it up for your questions. Remember, please, to wait for the microphone to get to you. Couple of things about this generation. As Jocelyn was telling us, it's very liberal, it's very socially equal or favoring those policies. Couple of things though, 41% of the eligible students in this survey are not registered to vote. Only 4% believe the military is a viable career. Is there a disconnect, do you think, Bridget, between reality and what this generation thinks reality is?
Oh, absolutely. I really hope those numbers of registered voters go up over time. I'm not quite sure, in previous generations if we had the same problem. And you would think, particularly with the media, of all the very, very close elections, every vote absolutely counts. But even some of the policies that they're very supportive of, I think one thing that will hit many of them, is the reality of all, certain things cost money. And so when we start to put the cost side into this, what kinds of things do we support? That'll be interesting to see how their views change.
Income and wealth gap registered as a significant factor for 61% of the people in this survey. Are you guys at the lunch table out in McLean thinking about that? I mean, I can't imagine that that's a top of mind thing for a 17-year-old kid.
Not necessarily, but we've had debates about it in our debate clubs, things like that.
It's the inequality thing,
Yeah,
right?
it's the inequality thing. It definitely is growing as time goes by. And as I don't know. I'm not going to make a judgment, but as long as the economy is not growing rapidly, people will think that the income gap is growing.
Right.
Like people think the income gap is growing.
For the record, the economy's growing 4% a year, yo.
Yeah.
You know, right? It is.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
And
Yeah.
the gap is
Yeah.
growing.
Talk to me about the inequality equation from the point of view of Euler out in Cincinnati.
Yeah.
Awareness is really high, I imagine.
It is really high. One of the things I did while I was there was accompany a group of students to a restaurant downtown where they learned about business etiquette and how to have a lunch with someone, maybe an employee or prospect. And the contrast between the neighborhood these kids are coming from and downtown where everyone was bustling, getting ready for Christmas shopping, it's really striking. And I think, they watch television, they see that gap. It's everywhere. And so I think, while awareness is growing among the population at large because of Occupy Wall Street and that kind of movement, I think when you're living those circumstances, it's pretty clear.
I commend to you, by the way, Amy's series on Euler. It's on our website, marketplace.org, but also her film that's coming out when? Soon, right?
Yeah, this spring.
Okay, good. This spring.
Yeah,
Wow.
thank
So
you.
6 more. All right. You hope? Fingers crossed?
Well, it's pretty much done. It's just a matter of people starting to show it.
All right,
so,
good.
Yeah, I'll keep you posted.
When will, and this might actually be a question for Jocelyn, but Bridget, I'll ask you anyway. When, in your experience, do these kids coming out of high school and transitioning through college into life experience, when do their views start to normalize and they become more like the rest of society at large, if that makes any sense? It's that old Churchill quote about liberals
it's a very
and
good question.
conservatives, right?
I can say economically as workers, around their late 20s, 32 is kind of the magic age as a labor economist where their income's kind of stabilized, their jobs kind of stabilized, they're pretty much done with education, and they're kind of settled into their neighborhoods and communities and income bracket. But their political views, I'm not quite sure.
Go ahead.
Let me mention something. You talked about and you asked us about voting, and there is a difference between voting and social engagement. Because what we are seeing with our students is that they are extremely socially engaged. Social entrepreneurship in the communities, in the world at large. But the voting is not the way they think that they should express this social engagement, and that's a matter of concern.
Yeah,
Why? Because they are telling us, we don't believe in the system as it is today.
That system right out there, by the way?
Yeah, the system right out there.
Yeah.
So let's not confuse social engagement with voting. And it's an alarm that we need to resonate with, namely, they are disaffected with the political system now, and that's not good.
Which is the bigger club? Is it the Habitat for Humanity Club at your high school, or is it the high school Republicans and Democrats?
At our school, yeah, I'd say it's Habitat for Humanity.
Yeah.
It actually is, yeah. But no, we don't have a very socially engaged, politically engaged school, though. But I think that I've seen a lot of schools they are. Like colleges especially. I think George Washington University is the most socially engaged politically.
Think about what they've seen. Not only did they grow up during the Great Recession, they've grown up during this age of terrible dysfunction in our government.
Right.
It's
They
no
don't
wonder
want to
they're
be part of
disaffected.
it.
Yeah.
I think we want to differentiate, though, between federal, which I think students are very disengaged, versus what's going on in their local communities, and whether that's local political campaigns or helping build homes or homeless shelters and those types of things. I think people are much more focused, and it would be interesting to get inside the numbers of, in their local communities, how they're reacting to what's going on.
Right.
But it's not only local. On a global level, we are seeing an enormous engagement of our students with in Africa, in the Dominican Republic, in India, in Haiti, etc. So that is also very telling. It's not only about me in my local setting, it's about me in the world at large. I have to contribute, I have to give back. And that's very healthy.
Picking up on his point, which he's raised a couple of times now about America in the global context, is your, and again, not speaking for the generation, but what's your sense of how interested your peers, your cohorts are about America's place in the world in the next 10 years?
Well, I think there was one question about how they think that should America involve themselves in every single foreign conflict. And I think it's interesting that more people in this generation, as people are maturing, they're realizing that America really shouldn't be involved in every single foreign conflict and things like that, which is very interesting because I think this is the first time in American history where that's really kind of grown this much. They have this sort of not isolationist but maybe non-interventionist sort of view, and that's across both sides of the political realm.
All right, so let's go to the floor. There are mic runners. I don't know where they are. They're walking up the aisle here. So do me a favor, raise your hand, and the people with the mics will find you. And we'll start, I guess, right over here on the aisle. Do me a favor, just tell me who you are, where you're from, and we'll get the show on the road.
My name is Kevin Upton. I live in Silver Spring, Maryland, just up the road. And I'm an alumnus of Northeastern University, and proudly so, I might add.
Did you get a job out of college?
Well, I went into a military career out of college.
All right,
So,
okay.
So I guess that's a job.
Yes, it was.
I would like to follow up with Keyaun on an interaction that he had with you, Kai, regarding the reality of 42% of his generation wanting to be
entrepreneurs,
business owners.
Right.
And before I pursue this, let me say, first of all, that I am not of Generation Z. I am.
But you look good, though.
I am probably of Generation A minus. But that being said, I found it interesting that you said in response to Kai that you wanted to be your own boss, start your own business, but you recognized that you may wind up working for somebody else when all is said and done. I'd like to carry that one step forward and just see what your perception is, going back to the lunch table in McLean. Do you sense in your generation an antipathy toward big corporations, big business, or even a hostility? Does that explain, if that's so, does that explain why the number of 42% seems to be as high as it is? Thank you very much.
Here's the corollary number, and I see Jocelyn nodding. It's like 65% of the people in this survey thought big banks and corporations had too much influence on American society, right? So the question, Ken, is how does that affect your perspective on your profession and your employment going forward?
So I definitely think that moving forward, if I were to go work for a big corporation, I would definitely sort of, view things differently now. The Occupy movement, things like that, they've really kind of put it in perspective that you really should be wary of who you're working for. Don't always, and always be aware of what's happening and things like that. So, but I don't know if it's really affecting it that much, to be honest with you. But I have talked to people who have been swayed away by the industry of finance, things like that. They think that's immoral. A lot of times people ask me, what do you want to do in your role? I want to be in finance. Well, hey, those are the big bankers. Those are the big corporate the big corporate bankers on Wall Street. They're doing these immoral things. They're stealing money and things like that. So I guess in a way it kind of has. And that's actually a lot of people. I've heard that from a lot of people.
But even though Goldman Sachs, as it has been called, is that vampire squid on the face of humanity, you want to go into finance?
I don't necessarily want to work in that and investment banking, other facets.
Okay, all right, just checking. All right, yes, please. Who's got the microphone?
Yes, hi. My name's Joe McCarthy. I live here in Washington. I'm retired Harvard administrator. I think we ought to say a word about financial aid in colleges. The sticker price that you see when you go on the website is not the whole answer.
Absolutely.
So Professor Long may be able to correct me in this, but as I recall at Harvard, and I think this is typical of a number of good universities, and to a certain extent I'm sure of Northeastern as well, the average tuition last year, was $18,000.
Yeah, point granted, and I gave the caveat, but
and the tuition paid by the 2/3 of the students who were on financial aid, 2/3 of the students on financial aid, was $12,000. And I don't just say this to promote Harvard, but many other universities are doing the same thing. They're being very generous because they want the diversity of people and students and ideas in the marketplace of ideas that good financial aid programs allow them to have.
Would that they were all good financial aid programs. Amy, what were you going to say?
I think this is why students are so confused about the price of college, because they see that sticker price. Many of them aren't aware that there's a college calculator on the website where they can estimate their financial aid, and maybe why so many are expecting that grants and scholarships will be the main way they pay for college, even though, as we've seen, that's not realistic. And that's because colleges haven't been very transparent about how pricing works. They mark up the
Well, I
sticker
mean,
price
what
and
about
knock
that?
it down.
it's a complicated system. So what you say is absolutely correct. It's interesting, though, sticker price, although most people don't pay it, students and families do take as a sign of quality. No college or very few colleges want to cut their prices, and those that have seen people react and say, well, you're not as good as you were before if you're cutting your price.
Yep.
It's also important to note that, even for these large sticker prices, colleges and universities are spending much more on students. Everybody's being subsidized.
It doesn't
But I'll tell you what,
It's much more complicated. Yes.
Absolutely given. But I'll tell you what, I had Drew Faust on the program, the president of Harvard, 6 weeks ago, and we had this whole conversation. And I'm here to tell you that if she comes out tomorrow and says Harvard's $25,000 a year, you guys are still going to have 87 bajillion applicants.
Yes.
It's interesting.
Right.
We talked about this in the green room, actually. So, at Harvard, if you make, I think it's $60,000, you go for free. They are coming out with these very simplistic messages about if your family's this, it's free. If it's below 180, you only pay 10% of your income, because it is so complicated. It's responding to the fact that no one understands. I have to go through this complicated financial aid formula, and I get an EFC and an SAR and all these other kinds of things.
Whatever all that is.
Take it-
So go ahead. So,
Let's take it to a more general level. I think our system in higher education is complex, I agree. Our system also is very welcoming to the low-income students, very welcoming by definition to those who can pay. The middle class is being squeezed. So you don't have access to the financial aid, you don't have access to the support. I'm talking about the system at the macro level.
Right.
For instance, at Northeastern, we give over $225 million in financial aid. 80% of the students are on financial aid in order to make sure that we're not facing that. But the system as such, low income, yes, high income, yes, squeezing the middle class.
I totally get that, but you appreciate the fact that I'm talking to a guy now who's in a position to start changing that, right?
No, that's what we're
your name
doing.
is on the letter.
But that's
right?
what we're
But with
doing.
limited
That's
funds-
what we're
Bridget, go
doing.
ahead.
Yes,
Right.
but with
Go ahead.
limited
You were gonna-
funds,
you were gonna
there
say.
is this question of do we really want Harvard to cost zero when we have a number of very wealthy families who could contribute to the pot and help subsidize other wonderful things that the institution provides. And so, you have this question of what do you want Bill Gates' child to pay? Sure, the University of Washington.
$1 billion.
Exactly.
Sorry.
So, there is something about it's in the best interest with limited dollars. Colleges want to really funnel money to needy students and provide all those other wraparound supports. And so it doesn't make sense to charge zero. But we have to have clear messages. We have to be able to say very simply, if you are this, then money is waiting for you, and you can trust that.
All right. We can go on that one all the live long day. Who's got the next microphone? There we go.
Good morning. My name is Maggie Ryden. I'm the Executive Director of the DC Alliance of Youth Advocates, and I live here in the district. And I'm curious to hear the panel's response to sort of a quandary we've experienced daily, in that 16 to 19-year-olds, even up to 25, are struggling to enter the workforce. And how is that lack or limited opportunity for early work experience either feeding in to this disconnect around future job opportunities and the realities of entrepreneurship, or actual preparedness for a college experience?
No, it's a great question. Joseph, and then Bridget, I want to get your take on this.
It goes back to what we discussed earlier, namely that we created in higher education this dichotomy between learning to live and learning to earn a living. At Northeastern, what we have is a system where the students, as I mentioned, go on long-term internships, 2 to 3 times, 6 months each. And then when they learn is they integrate the classroom experience with the work experience and the world experience, because they are in 128 countries. By the time they finish, we have the best job placement record in the country, bar none. Why? Because they're getting ready for that, and they get ready to understand what they want to do, what they don't want to do. And the employer is doing the same. So now what are we seeing? Is this model replicable? And the answer is you are seeing now various outfits, from the for-profits to universities, trying to integrate that. You have startups in the Silicon Valley telling you, once you finish, you're not ready for the workplace, come and spend 6 months with us, we'll give you an internship. They place people in internships, but that's too late. So we have to integrate the two while they are in college. And that's what we need to do.
Bridget, go ahead.
So I think what's happened in the economy, if you go back a couple generations, not really that far, teens used to work. And the youth employment market has completely dried up. And I think a lot of the reason why we're getting pushes for increases in the minimum wage is because those jobs are now going to people supporting families when they used to go to teenagers. And so I study, students working while they're in college, and unfortunately, the ideal is absolutely what Northeastern is doing. But more often what you see is they're piecing together service jobs who forget that their students won't give them time off to study for their midterms, and it starts to interfere with their progress through college.
Because
what
that's
you
an
want
add-on.
is that, yes, what you want is this integrated system where they're actually building skills, and that may just be, I need to show up to work on time, I need to do certain tasks. It may not be actually in their long-term career, but that's the market that's dried up.
Keyaun, do you have friends who are now seniors in college who are going to come home and live on their parents' couch?
I hope not.
Yeah.
But also, let me say, I
go ahead.
think what President Aoun is trying to say is that he wants colleges to work in unison with the employers. That's essentially what Northeastern is doing now with their co-op programs, things like that.
Right.
I think if we do more of that, we'll have less issues like that.
And also, those are not like flipping burgers, etc., while you are studying, even though there is nothing wrong with that. Is how is it the case that your work experience is feeding your learning? Therefore, how do they go together? So if you're studying engineering, are you working with GE? Are you working in Shanghai with the manufacturing? If you're in finance, same thing. If in every discipline that's why we monitor very carefully where we're placing them. And let me tell you, at the beginning of the recession, I was very worried that the number of internships co-ops will go down. It went up. Why did it go up? Because the employers stopped the summer internships. They said they don't work for us. The students come for 1 month, we train them, and the second month they disappear. Your students are with us for 6 months. So we are in the enviable position of having more internships than students. So it's not the case that the jobs do not exist. Universities have not integrated that. It's time to do it in their curriculum, in their approach to learning.
And this is a description of universities are more than just classes.
Absolutely.
But to be able to do these kind of placement, coordination, financial aid, wraparound services when you fail courses takes a lot more funds, and that's where we get into this battle of money.
I'm the one who failed the course. All right. A couple more, I think. Who's got the microphone? Yes, in the back.
Hi, Laura White. I work at a local community college in Montgomery County, and I work in HR. I do staff training, employment training. And one of our big concerns is community colleges. We're getting a lot more students who are going to public schools right now who say can't afford college, but they don't arrive college ready. And so they're required after testing to take developmental courses, which can be very discouraging because they don't accrue credit. And so their college persistence is really impacted. They can become very discouraged. So getting students to get through those classes. So could you talk a little about community colleges and the role of community colleges in helping people have a successful college experience so they could persist and go to a four-year school?
Right. Our community colleges in the United States really have taken the brunt of so many pressures as, students have been pushed down into them, and they have the least amount of funding to be able to support these students who have such diverse needs. The remediation problem is a huge one. Some research that I've done suggests 4 out of 10 first-year students need some kind of remediation. Wow. So they're paying for...
Sorry, this is in two-year colleges?
This is in all colleges. All colleges in the United States.
Say that again. 4 out of 10
students are placing into some kind of remediation.
Wow.
So they're paying for high school level courses at college level prices. And
not getting credit in many cases.
And not getting credit, and getting discouraged. And so there's a lot of thought within higher education about how to do this better. Community colleges definitely leading the way. And we have to think beyond just we need to teach you Latin and we need to give you this information to thinking about the trajectory of students and how do we best teach. So there's a big movement within higher ed to think about things like pedagogy. So how can we use technology, modules, flipped classrooms, tutors, other supports to get people through remediation quickly at a fairly low cost.
There is a social phenomenon too that 85% of the students go to public universities and colleges and community colleges. Only the rest, private universities, we represent a small chunk. Now, what do we see?
But you get all the blame.
No, we don't get all the blame. We get also a lot of benefits.
Right.
But what we are seeing, going back to the question about community colleges, is that when the individual states want to start cutting the budget, they start with the community colleges. They preserve the flagship systems, and they cut the community colleges. So we're squeezing the community colleges. And where is the American dream? The American dream is I start in a community college, then I can transfer to a public or private university. We are seeing less and less of that. That's worrisome.
Last one, I think, over here. Yes, sir.
Bill Miller. I'm a district resident. I'm a business owner, and I've got a son in high school.
Which son? Gabe?
Yeah, exactly.
Gabe here.
All right.
And the difference between Gen X and Gen Z, I'd like to hear maybe what everybody thinks about the two different generations. And generally speaking, I'll say that my cohorts in the business world don't feel wonderful about the employees that are coming out of Gen X. And is there a change in the way that the attitudes and the education and the preparedness for Gen Z, that what can we look forward to?
Yeah, have we learned from the past, right?
Are you talking about Gen
Gen
Y?
Y, right? You want
Gen
the
Y.
millennial? You're talking about the millennials, right?
Yeah.
I'm at the tail end of Gen X, and I'm 40.
So we're talking about the millennials, Gen Y. Have we learned then, as we go into this new cohort of kids entering college and the workforce, have we learned from our mistakes, Bridget?
I would suspect yes, because it's very different to grow up in a boom when you think everything's handed out for free versus to grow up in a recession where people are really struggling and having to be the best in order just to keep their job.
There is a change that we saw with the recession. I'm talking in higher education in general, that students used to believe that if they work for you, they are doing you a favor. Now they see that that's not the case, and it was a big wake-up call. I'm talking about in higher education in general. When you have a system like co-op, like the internship, you don't have this because from day one you're humbled, and you're humbled because you're negotiating, and learning about yourself and the environment. But going back to that, I have examples. For instance, when young lawyers starting in law firms. You used to tell the law firms, we may be here, we don't know whether we want to work for you now, can you give us a job? So the recession had a big impact on this attitude.
But I think that sense of entitlement may persist. I mean, the culture of everyone gets a trophy. You're all your own individual snowflake, as one analyst told me. I think it persists in this generation a little bit, and they may find that they're not rewarded at the level that they've become accustomed to in high school.
We began with the recession. We end with the recession. I believe the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Kai. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Let me thank Kai and Marketplace and my fellow panelists. This was a great discussion. Let me tell you, on a more narrow level, let me bring it back to higher education. What does the survey mean for us? It means that there are elements that we have to change. And what we have to change in higher education is the idea that the teacher is God, that the professor is God, or a goddess. It's no longer true. It's no longer viable. Those students, independently of whether they feel entitled or not, they have been used to having their own journey in negotiating the media, in negotiating knowledge, in getting knowledge. So therefore, our purpose is no longer to bring them to us and say, this is how it's going to be. We are seeing a shift from a teacher-centered approach in higher education to a learner-centered approach. And it's not easy for us. It's not easy for us as educators, because we are not going to be at the center stage. The second evolution of this aspect, this is not new. What I'm saying so far is not new. But what I'm going to say is going to be new for us in higher education, is that the approach that it was almost one size fits all. Yes, we provide different curricula, but you have to fit those curricula. We are moving to a system where higher education has to be much more customized and personalized. And it creates enormous questions. Do we have a common core? What is in education, whether it is at Northeastern or Harvard or any other place? What is that kind of education if we are moving to personalization, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? But we can no longer assume that the system that carried us for 300 years is going to carry us for the next 50 years. What is interesting in higher education is that we change the world, but we are extremely conservative when it comes to changing ourselves. And that's what this generation is telling us. We want you to change the way you approach us. So stay tuned, because there are going to be many changes in higher education. The pressure is there. The learner wants something very different. The customer is telling us, we want you to provide different opportunities. And I didn't use the term products, Kai. Let me end with one thing. I studied Latin, Kai, for 7 years. Okay? The fact that you failed didn't prevent you from succeeding. So thank you very much for being with us today, Kai. And next time we will have our panel in Latin. Thank you all. Thank you, Kai. Thank you. You were terrific. Thank you.